about learning. Now we're not going to talk about learning. We're talking about language experiences, aren't we? That's the vision. That's the plan. But if we get the words out.
That's right. It's kind of the point of the whole podcast. But let's not worry about that for a minute.
Let's not worry about getting that main bit right that actually explains what we're actually going to talk about today.
Breaking this language barrier, the fact that we can't actually say the words and podcast is a little challenge. Just there at the start, everybody.
Yeah, it's fine. We can get through it. So yeah, focusing on language, kind of covering everything from UI to language localization, I think. And me and Steve were having a conversation about one of his family members actually, and we were thinking about it going, actually this would be a really good topic for us to discuss. So I thought it might be a really good way to start this is let Steve kind of share his story and we can go from there.
Well, it's look, the thing is, I'm sure you're the same, but you tend to become the family IT support, and you know what I mean, and that's fine. That's the sector we work in, and you know, and that's what we do. But I was showing Sharon's uncle around, trying to get him up to speed with sending emails and stuff like that. Very wants to do it. Blew his mind with cloud and stuff like that, and you know, and we could share this stuff because he's a very smart guy, getting on a bit, never really engaged with computers in his career, but as a teacher, and he's doing a lot of sharing of audio files and stuff like that, and it kind of needed to be able to transport them around, and me and you know, yeah, we can stick them up on cloud, link to them, and then they're there, and it's a big file or whatever we do, you know, it's not a problem. And I was showing him around this stuff, and he said, and he's out of the west of Ireland, internet's terrible, so demoing it was really, really hard anyway. But he was trying to figure out trying to follow what I was doing, and I was trying to get him to drive so that he could press the buttons and kind of get used to that and go through it. And he was going, and now Steve, this is all too much now. It's too much. And I was going, well, and the penny dropped just then. This is a different language. If you look at a screen and you're trying to create an email or whatever it may be, you've got little envelope icons, you've got B for bold, I for italic, a U with a underscore under it and stuff like that. Now, most people listening will know what that is. But if this isn't your interface and it's not what you've learned, this is Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know, it's no different than that. So it's a completely different language. And even we can get lost in this language because you go, what on earth? Somebody chooses the wrong icon in an app, and you're going, what's that? It's just crazy stuff. And then so that made him feel a lot better because it wasn't that, and that was the thing. These aren't stupid people that you're trying to show something to. It's just that they don't yet speak the language, and it was just the penny dropped, and it was just seemed so important that is the way to approach it. That if you're teaching somebody a new language, you start off with, "Can I have a cup of coffee, please?"
Or something a little stronger.
Por favor. No, you start at the beginning. You know very little until you've been doing it and speaking it, and of course, you know, me and you, we've grown up all the way through it, all the way through. I'm a bit older than you, so I've been much further at the start of that, you know. But I'm in it, and I've been speaking the language for 20 years.
Yeah, it's a funny story. It's funny, isn't it? Because we see these things, and I wrote down dumb designs that make smart people feel stupid. Like, and it's like people have tried to almost be too smart to make things too slick and too easy, and as part of that, have made this kind of hieroglyphics for most people who can't understand it. I mean, there's loads of funny interaction stories, isn't there? There's the whole the idea that in a Windows computer you'd have to press start to stop. Like you had to press the start button to shut down your computer. Like whoever thought of that was obviously brilliant. But I mean, and this kind of dates back a little bit. So not dates back, but we're looking at how designers used to be able to cope with this is they utilize something called skeuomorphic design. So the idea of skeuomorphic design is when you're initially designing an interface and getting people on and start using these devices, you design the experience to look like real world items. And it's what Apple did initially when they launched the iPhone. You load up you open your phone and a calculator looks like a real world calculator. The calendar looks like a real world calendar. How you would navigate the calendar would feel similar to how you would navigate a real world calendar. And although obviously it's a digital experience, so you're not going to be taking these things off shelves necessarily, you're in a situation where the design is relevant and relatable, and it's a really good entry point to be able to understand what that experience is for anybody who's coming through the experience for the first time. Now, obviously, we're in a situation at the moment where we're transitioning with whether it's through Google's material design to what I call kind of the great abstraction. There's a need to kind of make everything cleaner, and as a result, remove all the little details that make things make sense. To most people. So if you're using apps all the time, you can make the logical jumps. But the problem is, if you don't, you've not got a small little steps. You've not got those little jumps. You've got to load up an application and go, what is this icon? Like, what is this thing? It doesn't mean anything. So I've not made that transition. And the same is we call it the burger icon. So it's the three lines at the top right that people have on mobile websites and things. Like, if you don't know what that is, I mean, you're kind of expecting a list, so kind of like, because it's a list of items, but does that really make sense? Does people understand what that means? We talked about the three dots.
Well, the three dots is now an abbreviation of the three lines. But what it doesn't mean anything in its own right. It's just made it smaller to make it smaller on your screen.
And then you've got things like, I think we talked about this earlier, Spotify's shuffle icon. So the Spotify shuffle icon, which is a toggle, is not a binary on-off toggle. You press it once, it shuffles. You press it twice, it smart shuffles. And you only really discover that if you try and turn it off. And then you've got your playlist that's full of all these things that you didn't actually plan to have in the first place. But luckily enough, you can press it off and it removes them. So at least that's something. And then obviously we've got Threads. So obviously yesterday, Threads launched, which is a new social app from Meta. Going into the application, and at the very bottom, you've got this box with a line through it, which from me, who's used these experiences, goes, oh, that must be like an edit or compose, because I've made that transition. Anybody who hasn't used these experiences before or coming to it for the first time, well, I have no idea what that thing is. It reminds me a little bit like a power button.
That used to be. I mean, back in the day, very much back in the day, it used to be like a little square that looked like a pad, even had little lines on it, with a quill off it. Looked like a little quill. And so you went, okay, that's writing on something. And that's now what it's. And then it went to a pen. Or a pencil.
Pencil was the thing, wasn't it? You said pencils for editing.
So it was because it was smoother and neater. Then it went to like just the square with kind of a pencil icon, and now it's literally just a square with a line through the corner. On Threads, you're just going, what? How do you ever know?
But it's interesting. It's interesting that we've learned through the transition, because we've been part of that transition. We've learned to know what that is. But anyone else, again, who's coming to these platforms for the first time, have no. It's like it is hieroglyphics. And then from a design point of view,
the same as native language as well. So if you're a native language speaker, slang and language changes. It's a amorphous anyway. So I speak to a lot of Europeans, and they learn language as learnt language. They're not native speakers. Their English is fantastic, far better than my other languages are ever gonna be. Because we're lazy because we're English in other languages. But it's the same. They don't understand, and the amount of side speech and colloquialisms and phrasing and stuff like that we use in natural language is mad difficult for Europeans to understand, or You know, somebody that's even further afield and their English isn't even as strong as, you know, you speak to some Dutch guys and you just go, are you English or what? You know, because you can't tell. The language, their accent's perfect, you know, and they just sound like Middle England accent. But it's the same with the iconography. It's the same thing. You know, it's moving.
You make that transition. And you make that transition into that web environment. It's another thing you have to consider. That you've not only got the iconography and the way those interfaces work, and that's the beauty to some extent with iconography is in theory they should in theory what's it called? I don't know what the right phrases, but transfer or translate or transcend. That's the word.
That's the one I knew you were going to get there eventually.
They should be there and designed in a way where they transcend language.
Yeah.
But you still, when you're looking at talking about it, but for the long time, the web's been an international business. Like we're having to design these experiences and take that into consideration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And design in different countries is different as well. So, you know, some people like clean, some people like it more real world. You know, we've still got designs in other countries that have got, do you remember the glass button style? You know, so there's a button, a navigation button that was a very glassy looking, you know, which is very kind of 90s.
Yeah.
But I still see new sites and quite significant sites in other countries that are using those things because they like that style and they want that real world thing, maybe to communicate to their audiences.
Yeah.
You know, just because we've got flat and more material looking and, you know, and things like that. And, you know, no, it's all just solid colours now or it's grey with a very fine line on it, you know, all that type of stuff.
And the background's not white. The background is just off white.
Slightly. Yeah, that's right. You just go, oh my God, you know. But of course, that's fine for our audience, but it has to be right for your audience. You know.
And you look at that and taking it forward and taking the next step. And when you talk about the challenges around language as a whole, you're talking about kind of dialect. And we do speak very differently to the way that we type or the way that we communicate with each other in different spaces. And we have to be designing a kind of a customer service experience that allows for those changes in dialect and the way that people talk and experience the web and experience these platforms.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, are we talking about localization here? Is that what we're talking about? Is that the thing, or are we talking about?
There's two sides.
Explain that. You're the expert in this than I am.
So there's two sides to it, isn't it? For me, you have to really. A lot of people will use localization as to actually mean translation, which is for me is very dangerous because that doesn't take into any cultural sensitivities that you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
So I would say there's two thoughts. There's language and the ability to communicate, and language select and translations. And on top of that, there is localization. Whether you argue that language is part of localization, you could then make that debate. But ultimately, when we're looking at languages and where they're used, it's difficult to kind of make that argument because multiple languages are used in multiple cultures, and therefore they probably should be kept to some extent separately, even if they're in those same conversations. But I know you were working on a project specifically in that kind of language space, where you were trying to look at how you can kind of communicate and look at language in the way that people are talking and communicating.
Yeah, well, look, the thing is actual native language speaking, and we obviously just touched on that from a voice perspective, you know, when people have different colloquialisms and stuff like that. If you're just trying to communicate, like I'd say everybody, but lots of people know about stuff like Google Translate and things like that works, you know, quite really well, and you can have a slightly disjointed but conversation with somebody who makes yourself understood, and that's a real challenge when you're out on holiday. But it's only a mere inconvenience, you know, because if you don't know how to order a coffee, you know,
that's something that I should really learn in every language.
Right, you won't die, you know. It's not a problem. It's not a problem.
What I'll do is I'll take an icon round with me.
Oh yeah, well everybody will understand that because
it'll be a mat in the form of a beer mat icon. What I'll do is I'll design a selection of beer mats that are icons for interfaces.
Don't say these ideas out loud. The many thousands of people that listen to this podcast, they may take the idea away and you've missed your opportunity. laying down gold, you know, Gavin. No, laying down gold.
That's what I'm here for.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. Legend in your own lifetime. Yeah, but look, you know, it's a mere inconvenience, isn't it? You know, and you could have your little show card of a beer mug or a coffee mug, and then you could, you know, somebody wouldn't understand.
I could then fold the coffee like one smaller if I want to get an espresso.
You're really overthinking this now. Right. Now you just have another card with a smaller cup of coffee on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, overthinking it. Over-engineered, you've just done that. Over-engineered the iconography. Yeah. Anyway.
I need to A/B test it, I think.
Yeah, okay. All right. Shall we move on with the
Yes, move on. Yeah, sorry, I apologize.
please, desperately. So Google Translate, great tool, but driven from a translation API, and Microsoft does something similar. And the power of those now is absolutely phenomenal. We've talked about it probably on other podcasts, just the way that now understanding voice is massively important. So we now know what's been said in any language. We can now detect language. So you can detect what language has been spoken, and you can output text to a speech in any language. Yeah. So you've got the whole mix, and in between you can speak in English and output in Hindu. Yeah. So that whole piece is available with the technology from all the big vendors that has been worked on over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's now a proven technology. So it isn't new, but the application is slow at the moment. We've got little bits like Google Translate to showcase all this technology. The reason you have Google Translate is because they want to sell it to commercial businesses, because they go, look how good it is. Imagine having this in your business. You know,
they've tried to add it into that. They've added it into their Pixel Buds as well as a mechanism for selling their product.
Yeah, that's right. They're doing it, and it's great. You know, so yeah, it's fully integrated. You can actually hear the answer and stuff like that. And that technology now is so we're working on a project with some European partners on now doing live translation over phone, so that in between your agent and the customer, you can actually inline translate. And that means that then your English speaking agent, because translation services are very difficult and very expensive to acquire.
Yeah.
So for the likes of the NHS, for instance, I literally had a conversation with them the other day, and they struggle with the new influxes of people coming in who have healthcare needs. They need to be helped out. There's a massive delay in getting treatment. So of course everything compounds, and it becomes a month before treatment, because the symptoms are very poorly understood without a translator in place to translate. I am feeling hot, fevery, sick, whatever it may be, to get across those symptoms so that help can be given.
Yeah.
So
it's dangerous. It's a little bit dangerous if you get that wrong, though, isn't it?
What? So if you go, I'm hot, cold, cold, hot. But those things are really, it's really tough to do if you're trying to rely on a third-party translation service, which is what they currently are. So that's what happens. And then if you're talking about context and tweaking the way that the conversation works, you've actually got things like, say, Volkswagen. So Volkswagen will translate as Volkswagen if it's in Finnish or something like that.
Yeah.
So you won't know so the English version of that will still come out as Volkswagen. So there won't be a direct translation because it's a brand. So you can tweak those things and make that right. And this, if you want a golf experience, it's VW golf experience, not a golfing experience. Again, the context is right. So we make sure you manage context, and we're doing stuff like that, you know, and it's working extremely well. So some of the big BPOs in Europe are picking this up now, which are kind of contact center providers. So, you know, the outsourcing people that are doing that type of stuff. And that's it, because it's such an incredibly powerful tool, because English speakers are easier to get hold of, whereas other languages, and to support other languages and different audiences is really tricky to do, you know, or they become very expensive individuals. But technology is there to do it, you know, so there's no big challenge anymore to do that kind of stuff.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because when you're looking at those communities that need support, like we were talking about, healthcare is massive, social care is massive. You don't want to create a situation where people they're getting a worse service or no service because of the language barrier and because of those barriers that are in place. And you want to make sure, and ultimately, if there are these tools available, which means that someone is not having to hire a translator or 5 translators or 10 translators in order to be able to do the job, and you can then utilize these tools as a mechanism to be able to do that and be able to at least streamline it in the meantime, or at an affordable cost. And it means that these organizations can create a service where there's an element of balance across the whole of their offering, and we're able to create that better service across the organization for everybody, and make it
The thing is, look, and it can, by using technology, you can scale as much as you want as well, of course. So the thing is, if you've got you know, we have refugees coming in, all legitimate, and they're coming in and all that type of stuff, but they still need to be looked after. Public sector services need to be accessible. Healthcare needs to be accessible. Education needs to be accessible. All the bits of our community that knit us together need to be accessible. So if you can't access that stuff, you're stranded, you know. If you've ever been to Tokyo or somewhere like that, there isn't any English there. It's all in Japanese. Fair enough. There's no reason for it to be. But you are going around like, I have no idea, because it's not even close. It's not even, it's again, we're down to this symbolic thing. It's a different language that you just don't understand, and it's symbols, and it's a different thing. You know, I don't speak Japanese. I don't think I'd ever be able to. No, no chance. Or read it or understand it. So then you're really lost, and you don't realize quite how lost you are. Until you enter that thing. But imagine if you are somebody else that doesn't understand English and comes in, and you're trying to engage with a country that we don't speak that many languages. It's a general population, you know.
The nuances as well, and the language that are used, and there's a language that are used by a small number of population that you still need to make sure you have those capabilities in place.
Well, there's over 7,000 languages spoken. You know.
My first thought when you mentioned going to Japan was, I know Johnny well, all I'll be doing is picking my phone up, taking a picture and chucking it through Google Lens, and I'm just hoping it will be able to do the translation job for me.
Well,
the problem then is
it's doing exactly what that's exactly the translation.
That's what the system's doing. It's interesting, isn't it, how we look at this and we go and we talk about to some extent, if we go full circle, like we talk about, to some extent, from a language point of view, iconography, there is a beauty to iconography if it's done right, because it does transcend language in most cases.
Yes, it does. Yes, you're right.
The magnifying glass is symbolic for most people in regards to what it's utilised for. It would be really interesting to test that with people who haven't, test people who don't use this machine to see. Because we make those assumptions that people don't have that understanding, and ultimately it's also used for zooming and elements as well. So it would be, I think, what the real good test would be, bringing in people who haven't or don't use these on a daily basis and test to see whether or not they have that full level of understanding. But in most cases, for those people that are using the technology, those icons do transfer across multiple languages, and it means that you don't have to have, to some extent, the description of what those elements are underneath, because people will understand that most the people who use this technology on a daily basis know what these things do.
Yeah.
But we also have to make sure that we're not negating those and creating a worse experience for those that don't have that understanding in place as well. And the challenge there is going, you have to look, it's like you automatically, as a brand, you're making a conscious decision to focus on a specific user type. Yes. And most people won't necessarily look at it that way, but ultimately by doing that, you're ultimately also excluding another user base as well.
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting we have a toggle where you have a multiple set of, so 2 sets of icons. You start off with the super descriptive, and you go into settings. You can go slick it for me, or whatever you want it to be, where it automatically abstracts the icons and makes it all look nice. But there's definitely a happy medium, I think, to be put in place here.
Yeah, no, it is, and again, this language barrier needs to be considered. You know, again, you're excluding old audiences either through voice by not being able to engage with somebody in their native language, or through a UI that you've made it so clean that it doesn't bear any resemblance. You know, you're talking about the magnifying glass. Well, it is literally now aligned with a
circle on the end, isn't it?
Circle on the end. Now, you know, I don't know. You take that to somewhere in outer Mongolia that they don't have phones.
They don't have magnifying glasses.
Or don't have microphone. Yet, why would they understand that? You know, without it being something that's much more detailed in the design of it. You know, we are doing that, and it's fine for the native, you know, digital natives that have grown up with it and they never knew. They were born after the iPhone. You know, geez.
It's back down to the point. It's back to the floppy disk discussion again, isn't it? if you bring that into the fold, like the fact the save icon, and everyone knows about the memes. Where the save icon came from, and people are like, don't understand the context of what that was.
They never saw the physical item.
They didn't. They don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know what pain.
I saw one, and of course the original. I know we're gambling on here with time, but but I saw the image, which was actually not a representation of a 3.5-inch floppy disk, which isn't floppy, it was hard, but a 5-inch floppy. It was floppy, and that's why it's called floppy disk.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, it's a much nicer icon actually. You know, there's a save icon, but God Almighty, how do you understand that? You know, most of the people using this weren't born when that was, you know, deprecated, and you know how would they know? No.
Is there a sense of irony, or a sense of like those people, some people who would have been forced to who might have used computers initially, who know what those things are, versus who might not have continued using computers in another age and won't understand what the new icons are, and then some people who have transitioned to like the new icons, understand the new icons, but don't really have the context around what the floppy disk or the original icon was.
There is going to be somebody that was doing that, and they're now like, I don't know, in their 70s, but they were working on that at that time, maybe doing word processing or something and using floppy disks that never really engaged with any other technology other than you know, simple Amstrads and stuff like that at the time, and just going, but I don't really understand my phone, and it's got icons that relate to all the stuff that they used back in the day.
I'd be really interesting to hear. I was kind of around like from the people who are listening. I think we have like a comment box.
You can ask
questions. I think on Spotify people can ask questions, like what experiences they've had, what have they seen where they've just been completely either confuzzled by something that they're trying to interact with and just completely don't know what this is, or even in experiences with family members who they've tried to go through the process of explaining like what these things are, what they do, and the interface. I'd be really interested to hear those stories.
Another language. It's another language, and that was actually made it a lot easier to explain. Really. So if there's a takeaway from this, remember you speak another language than other people do. If you understand your tech, you know, you just do, and it's as simple as that. You know,
Brilliant.
but we have to be a bit careful about how far we take that language. Don't use so much slang in your UI design. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's it for it. We've covered a lot of ground. It's going to be a slightly longer episode than usual, but thank you to everybody who's stayed along the